Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're exploring something really intriguing, Bhairava.
Bhairava.
Yeah, he's this figure in Hindu mythology and spiritual practice, and honestly, he's a lot more complex than you might think.
Definitely.
So we're diving into a YouTube video from a channel called Tantric Spirituality.
Okay.
It features this spiritual teacher, Rajashi Nandi, who really breaks down different types of Bhairava, where they came from, how they might be worshipped. It's fascinating stuff.
Well, what's interesting about Bhairava right off the bat is we're not just talking about one entity, like you might expect.
Okay.
Nandi actually mentions there are 64 Bhairavas.
64.
64. With 8 of them, the primary ones, known as the Ashta Bhairava.
Oh, okay.
And each of these Bhairavas govern specific domains and have specific powers.
So it's like a whole, like a council of specialists you can call on depending on what you need.
Exactly.
Okay, so if I needed, say, like amazing knowledge or protection from bad vibes, I'd call on a specific Bhairava for help.
Exactly. For instance, Nandi talks about Ainanga, who bestows exceptional knowledge,
Okay,
and Samar, who protects you from harmful spirits and stuff like that.
cool.
He even mentions that there are temples dedicated to these Ashtapaiharava in places like Kashi and Allura.
Really?
So it's not just like a mythological concept. These are actual deities that are part of spiritual practices.
That's fascinating. So then we have Kaal Bhairav, who seems to be a pretty important figure in this whole pantheon. Where does he fit in?
Well, this is where it gets interesting and maybe a little darker.
Okay.
Kalabhairava's origin is rooted in Shiva's anger, and his story is in multiple Puranas.
Oh, the Puranas, those ancient Hindu
Right.
scriptures.
But, and this is important, the way his story is told can vary depending on which one you're looking at.
So what's the general story?
Well, the most common version goes something like this. Brahma and Vishnu, two super powerful deities, are in this heated debate about who's superior.
I can see that leading to some trouble.
Yeah. And then Shiva, the ultimate god in this context, appears before them.
Okay.
And instead of diffusing the tension, Brahma, he insults Shiva. He boasts about his seniority, how he's more powerful.
Insulting Shiva, that doesn't sound like a good idea.
No, not at all. Shiva is completely enraged by Brahma's arrogance, and from that anger emerges Kalabhairava.
So he's like the embodiment of Shiva's wrath.
Exactly.
Wow. So he must be a pretty intense, maybe even scary deity, right?
You're getting the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And to really emphasize his power, Kalabhairava does something pretty drastic.
Okay, what does he do?
He uses his fingernail, the one on the little finger on his left hand, to sever one of Brahma's 5 heads.
He cuts off his head with his finger. That's intense.
It's a powerful image, and it's not over. The severed head doesn't just vanish.
What happens to it?
It remains attached to Kalabhairava's hand. It's known as the Brahma Kapala, which literally means Brahma's skull.
I'm really trying to wrap my head around that imagery. It's heavy. He's born from Shiva's fury, and he holds the skull of the universe's creator.
It's a huge statement about his power and connection to the destructive forces of the universe, right?
It's like he's holding both creation and destruction at the same time.
You're picking up on something really important there.
Yeah.
Kalabhairava embodies both the terrifying and the transformative.
Yeah, I see that.
But there's another layer here.
Okay.
The sin of Brahmahatya, which literally means killing of a Brahmin.
Right, because Brahma's not just any god. He's the creator, the source of the Vedas, like all of spiritual knowledge.
Exactly. So killing him, even just severing one of his heads,
Yeah,
that has to have some pretty serious repercussions.
definitely.
And in this telling, the sin takes on a physical form, a woman named Brahmahati.
Okay.
And get this, she's fated to follow Kalabhairava wherever he goes.
He's got Brahma's head on his hand, and now the embodiment of the sin following him around.
But it's not what you might think. When Vishnu sees all this, he recognizes it as Shiva's Leela.
Leela, which means divine play, right?
Exactly. It's not random punishment. It's all part of this bigger cosmic play meant to teach a lesson.
So it's like even on a cosmic level, our actions have consequences.
Exactly.
But what's Brahmahati doing, just like following him around? Is she punishing him?
She explains to Vishnu that following Kalabhairava is her way of worshiping Shiva.
Really?
It's like acknowledging and carrying the weight of the sin is a form of devotion.
That's, wow, makes you think about how we deal with our own mistakes. It's not always about punishment, but accepting responsibility and moving forward. But where are they going? What's he doing with Brahma's head?
He goes on this journey, a pilgrimage, wandering through all these different realms, ultimately ending up in Varanasi.
Varanasi, that's in India, right?
Right. And that's where the Brahmakapala, the skull, finally detaches from his hand.
So he just, like, dropped it.
Well, it happens at a very specific place in Varanasi. It's now known as Kapal Mokhan, which literally means skull liberation.
Okay.
And the most important thing is Varanasi becomes Kaal Bhairava's permanent residence.
So this whole journey was leading him there.
It seems that way.
But what about Brahmahati? Was that ever resolved?
And this is where Nandi makes this fascinating connection to the Kapalika tradition within Agora Tantra.
Okay.
So in this tradition, initiates are given a human skull, and they're told to wander for 12 years.
12 years?
12 years. They live apart from society, surviving on alms. It's intense.
A human skull? That sounds pretty hardcore.
It's definitely not your typical spiritual practice. But Nandi draws a parallel between this practice and Kaal Bhairava's wandering with Brahma's skull.
So both Kaal Bhairava and these initiates are carrying these skulls, living outside normal society.
Exactly. And the idea is they're both trying to achieve a kind of divinity, a transcendence, through enduring hardship.
It's about confronting death and emerging transformed.
You got it.
Wow. So we've got this figure who's terrifying, transgressive, but also a form of Shiva. I mean, that's not something you usually hear about in, like, mainstream spirituality, right?
And that's what's so interesting about him. He challenges our assumptions about divinity and the path to enlightenment.
So he's breaking all these rules, but he's still considered a manifestation of Shiva.
Absolutely. Nandi makes that very clear. Even though he might seem unorthodox, even scary, Kaal Bhairava is part of Shiva. It's a reminder of how vast and complex divinity can be. Shiva can be the benevolent yogi, and he can be the wrathful destroyer. It's all part of the same cosmic dance.
I'm starting to see why this deep dive is so fascinating. But we haven't even talked about Bhatuk Bhairava yet.
You're right, we haven't.
So who is he?
He's often depicted as a child, and he's a really crucial figure in Bhairava worship.
A child. That's a little different from skull-carrying, head-severing Kaal Bhairava.
It might seem like a contradiction, but remember, divinity is multifaceted. Bhatuk Bhairava is the son of Kali, or Chandi.
Oh, wow. Powerful goddesses in their own right.
Right. And his role is to protect devotees from troubles.
So if you're having problems, you call on Bhatuk Bhairava.
Exactly. And Nandi emphasizes his quick response to prayers, especially if you come to him with real emotion, a sincere connection, and gratitude. He even shares some personal stories about his experiences with Bhatuk Bhairava.
So he's really drawing on his own practice here, which makes it all so much more relatable.
It really does.
But what about someone like me or anyone listening? Is Bhairava worship something anyone can do?
That's where it gets really practical.
Yeah.
Nandi mentions this simple mantra, Om Bam, that anyone can use to connect with Bhatuk Bhairava.
Okay.
He suggests that even a little bit of success in Bhairava sadhana can bring benefits, both spiritual and material.
Hold on, Sadhana. What's that?
It basically refers to a dedicated spiritual practice. And in this case, even a little effort in your Bhairava sadhana can bring positive results.
So you don't have to be a Kapalika initiate wandering with a skull for 12 years.
Not at all. Nandi's point is that developing trust in Bhairava can lead to big changes in your life. He even suggests that Bhatuk Bhairava can prevent problems from even arising, like a guardian angel almost.
That's amazing. Like a divine problem solver. There's so much to think about here.
There really is.
What's the biggest takeaway from all of this?
I think the most important thing to realize is
That this whole deep dive into Bhairava is showing us a whole new side of spiritual practice, especially in Tantra.
Right.
Like, it's not always about peace and happiness and light. Sometimes it's about confronting the shadows, our fears, you know?
I think you hit on something really important there.
Like those Kapalika initiates wandering for 12 years with the skull.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder why facing those dark parts of life can lead to spiritual growth.
Doesn't it?
It seems counterintuitive.
It is fascinating.
Yeah.
And it really goes to the heart of Tantra.
Yeah.
Like that tension between destruction and the divine.
Mhm.
It's about embracing everything.
Yeah.
The light, the shadow, the beautiful, the scary. Kaal Bhairava really embodies that, right?
He does, and especially when you think about how he's both Shiva's wrath and a form of Shiva himself.
Exactly. Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, the destructive force and the divine power.
I like how Nandi brings his personal practice into this whole discussion.
Me too.
It's not just theoretical. He's talking about his own experiences.
Right, like with Bhatuk Bhairava.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just this cute image of a child deity. He's a fierce protector.
Absolutely.
And Nandi's stories really make you believe it.
They do. It makes you wonder what kind of stuff he's gone through that made him believe in Bhatuk Bhairava's power so strongly.
I know, right? And what you said about approachable spiritual practices,
Hmm.
Nandi said anyone can use the mantra Om Bam to connect with Batuk Bhairava.
That's right.
It's simple, but he says it can be so powerful.
It can be.
You don't have to go on a 12-year pilgrimage with a skull to benefit.
Exactly. It's about that trust. Cultivating trust in Bhairava, and then things can change in ways you wouldn't expect.
It's not about instant gratification.
Yeah.
It's more about building a relationship with the divine.
Surrendering to it, letting
Yeah.
it guide you.
I see a theme here. Trust, surrender, being open to the unexpected. It's not what we usually hear about spirituality, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's what makes exploring these lesser-known figures like Bhairava so cool. It breaks our expectations, opens us to new possibilities. But going back to Kaal Bhairava for a second,
Okay.
I keep thinking about Brahma losing his head for disrespecting Shiva.
It's a pretty intense image.
It is.
Mm.
What do you think the deeper meaning is? What does it say about our spiritual practice?
I think it's this cosmic reminder to stay humble. No matter how much you think you know, there's always more to learn. Approaching things with humility and awe can lead to deeper understanding and growth.
I like that. It's about wanting to learn, not just demanding answers.
Yeah.
Who knows what we might discover with that kind of attitude?
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. We've covered a lot.
We have.
There's always more to explore.
Always.
But going back to Kaal Bhairava and Brahma,
Yeah.
it's a reminder that even Brahma, the creator of the universe, isn't above consequences.
And, it's not just about punishment.
Right.
Brahma's encounter with Kaal Bhairava, it was rough,
Definitely.
but it ultimately led him to recognize Shiva's power.
It's like sometimes our biggest challenges lead to the most growth.
Exactly. They make us let go of our egos and see things in a new way. What about you? What's standing out to you from this whole deep dive?
Well, one thing that really strikes me is how we're challenging those simple ideas of good and bad deities. Like
Mhm.
Kaal Bhairava, with all the death and spirits and things that are usually taboo, he seems bad at first, scary even.
Yeah.
But he's also Shiva, a powerful protector, a guide to liberation.
It's a good point. It reminds us that things aren't always black and white, especially in spirituality. What we see as negative or scary could actually be incredibly wise and powerful.
Right. Like darkness isn't bad, it's just the absence of light. They're part of the same thing.
Exactly. And I think that's so important for anyone exploring spirituality,
Yeah.
especially in Hinduism, which is so diverse and rich.
Hmm.
Don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Engage with parts of the divine that seem strange or scary at first.
There might be some amazing wisdom hidden there.
There might be.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, I'm feeling pretty inspired to learn more about Bhairava. Maybe even try that Om Bam mantra.
That's the spirit. Remember, we've just scratched the surface here.
Yeah.
There's so much more to Bhairava and Tantra, so many paths to explore, so many different ways of seeing things.
So if you're interested in what you've heard, keep going.
Right.
Do your own research. See what resonates with you.
You never know what you might find.
You might be surprised. Well, speaking of surprises, maybe it's time to wrap up this part of our exploration.
Maybe it is. But before we do, I want to leave you with one last thing to think about.
I'm ready. Lay it on me. What is it?
Well, we're talking about Brahma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how he faced those consequences for, disrespecting Shiva.
Yeah.
So if even the creator of the universe can experience those kinds of repercussions for his arrogance,
Yeah. What do you think that tells us about how we approach our own spiritual journeys?
it really makes you think about how important reverence is. And humility too, I guess, no matter where you are on your path.
Right, like there's always something bigger than us, something we don't fully understand. And maybe, just maybe, approaching our practices, whatever those may be, with humility, with a sense of awe, it allows us to open up to a deeper level of understanding.
I love that idea. It's like instead of coming to the universe with demands, we come to it with a genuine desire to learn and grow.
Exactly. Like shifting our focus from what can I get to what can I understand.
That's so powerful. And who knows what amazing things we might discover along the way if we approach things with that mindset.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
but it feels like just the beginning.
Yeah, there's always more to explore, isn't there?
Always. What we've talked about is just a little glimpse into Bhairava and Tantra. There's so many different interpretations and practices and lineages within this tradition, each with its own perspective.
So if you're listening and you're intrigued by what you've heard,
Mm-hmm.
we encourage you to, keep going. Do your own research.
Exactly.
Find what resonates with you. You might be surprised by what you discover.
You really might. And, it's not just about the destination. It's about the journey,
The
right?
journey.
Keep an open mind. Embrace the unexpected. And you never know. You might just find yourself transformed along the way.
Beautifully said.
Ah.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up our deep dive into the fascinating world of Bhairava.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of the universe.